Saturday, October 23rd, 2021, and time keeps passing, so the 2021 Vasa has concluded, and it's raining, and the mind has different moods. Sometimes we're in the mood for interaction and being with other people. Sometimes we're in the mood for being on our own or being more quiet, not speaking, being in retreat. And sometimes there's nothing much coming up in the mind, so the mind can be empty. So a lot of the practice, in the monastery, is acquiring a taste for emptiness. So normally we're looking forward, or we're in that becoming mode. And but what's it like when the mind is just empty? Normally when the mind is empty, that's like a vacuum, so the past karma comes to fill it. And if we know that's what's happening, then we can just watch it. We can watch what's in the mind with mindfulness. Things come into the mind, and there's the moods and feelings that go along with it. Someone asked this morning, breakfast time, what kind of... It was in the context of understanding that sometimes monks leave the training or disrobe, and sometimes even very senior monks, why does that happen? And we're just reflecting on that a little bit. And why do people say give up on the training, or we don't have to think of it in terms of monks, but we can think of it in terms of just everybody. Why would we want to stop practicing or throw in the towel, so to speak? And the Dhamma is very interesting, and it's a different flow or a different stream than the stream of the world. But then the world creeps in. So when the world creeps in, then our Dhamma practice just becomes seeking the same things we were seeking in the world. And so something that can happen after a long period of time is we might feel like or I should say that a different way, maybe feel that we might think the practice isn't working, but there's a misunderstanding in the mind where we're actually viewing it in a worldly way. For example, if we think Dhamma practice is about just being happy all the time, or if we think Dhamma practice is about we're supposed to achieve a state where we always feel good, then that's relating to it with a worldly attitude. Because always feeling good is what we're trying to get anyway. So Dhamma practice is fundamentally different than that. And it's not about trying to feel good all the time. You might think, I just don't really feel good that often, or I'm not feeling good all the time, practice isn't working. And so that's not that the practice isn't working. What's not working is our attitude towards the practice, because it was a wrong attitude to begin with. So let's cultivate the right attitude to begin with. And that right attitude is, if things are good, that's good. If things aren't good, that's good. It's all grist for the mill. So that's the Dhamma attitude. That's the attitude to really establish at the outset. Because it's not that we're going to just be happy all the time. if we practice for a long time. The body and mind is still there, and the old kamma is still arising. We call that the vipaka. But what can change based on our Dhamma practice is our response to our experience. So we use the Four Noble Truths as a framework to view our experience. I was talking with Trevor before he left today, and he was relating to a story about Tenzin Palmo. If anybody's ever read her biography, Cave in the Snow, she had an experience where it kind of illustrates this. It's where we experience dukkha and we think something's wrong, and maybe we're not practicing correctly because we're experiencing dukkha. And yet dukkha is, we're practicing to see dukkha, and so it's inevitable that it's gonna reveal itself. But dukkha by its very nature is dukkha, so dukkha is something which makes us feel like things aren't right, that's why we translate it as suffering. So Tenzin Palmo had this experience of her cave was leaking. So the snow was melting in her Himalayan cave. All she wanted was for the drips to not come into the cave. And she kept thinking, if only this water didn't come into this cave, then I would be happy. And it was this intense feeling of dis-ease that water was coming into the cave. And this led to insight for her. So it actually transformed her practice completely, because then it flipped. Oh, well, that's the world. Samsara is like this. It's unsatisfactory. So that led to a deep insight into the unsatisfactory nature of the world and of samsara, of cyclic existence. But it came through seeing dukkha. So the world isn't a refuge. There's always going to be something wrong with it. We can't fix it. It's impossible. This is an impossibility to fix the world. Or as Lumpur Pasano likes to say, water flows downhill. So it's always going downhill. So with Dhamma practice, we start to see, oh yeah, it's just this way. It's just dukkha. Sometimes we might suffer about the way society is right now. So, and think, well, if it only wasn't this way, or if it only wasn't for this group of people, then everything would be okay. It's definitely not the case. And in terms of impermanence, or the impermanent natures of the world, then even if things get really, really bad at some point, actually things aren't that bad right now. We're just very soft. We're a very soft society, so things might seem like extra bad, but we're still not like in a famine or thing. Historically, people have still had it much worse than us. But if it does get much worse, then at some point it'll get better again. Or if things get better, then at some point they'll get worse again. So it never ends. It just goes up and down. And what we can know, so there's this not sure nature of the world as well. So what we don't really know what's going to happen, but what we can know is that in 100 years' time, none of us will be here. So we can know the nature of impermanence in that sense, in terms of death. We can know that in 100 years' time, not a single one of us will be here. And our lives will have been lived however they were lived, and that's it. There will be different generations, different people, different ideas, different views. Be completely different. So when we come back to Dhamma, we just take the opportunity to look at what are things like here and now. What's the experience like here and now? What's the mood here and now? What's the feeling here and now? Is there pleasant feeling? Is there unpleasant feeling? Is there happiness? Is there suffering? What's it like? What's the reaction to it? One definition of Dhamma practice is to modify our behavior to be more in line with the truth of cause and effect. So that's the sila, so that's the acknowledgement of our actions do have results. So we decide to try to rectify our actions of body and speech. That's for the ordained Sangha, that's what we call the Vinaya. Vinaya deals with body and speech, and then Dhamma deals with the mind, the training of the mind. So we rectify our actions of body, speech, and mind to be more in line with the true nature of things. And our actions, they have results. So in the Buddha's teaching, the unwholesome action results in unpleasantness, suffering. Wholesome action, body, speech, and mind, results in happiness, well-being, sense of ease, what we call sukha. And there is actually a fixed law of kamma. Kamma is the description of what the results of intentional action are. And if it's unwholesome, then it results in suffering every time. And if it's wholesome, it results in happiness every time. And the problem here is there's a bit of a time lag between the action and the result. And so we get confused. And we do things that we think lead to happiness, they actually lead to suffering. And so that's the whole problem, that's the whole issue. And so when we look into things deeply and we rectify our actions of body, speech, and mind to be more in line with the truth of the way things are, according to wholesome and unwholesome action, kusala and akusala, then things do start to get better. The mind is inclining towards not wanting to say very much this evening, so I'll leave it there for tonight.